After 60, one of the hardest decisions is not choosing where to live, how much money to save, or what to do with the time you have left. The hardest decision is accepting that some people should no longer have free access to your life. I'm not talking about hating anyone or becoming a bitter, suspicious person, closed off from the world. I'm talking about something quieter, more painful, and far more necessary. Protecting the little piece that still keeps you standing. Because there comes an age when every heavy visit costs you sleep. Every guilt-filled conversation costs you health. Every request disguised as love takes away a piece of your energy. And the danger does not always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from someone who smiles, walks into your house, calls you stubborn, and makes you feel guilty for wanting to breathe. Today, I'm going to speak honestly about 5 types of people you may need to cut off before it is too late. At 84 years old, I learned something no one likes to say out loud. Not every kind of company is a blessing. There are people who walk into your living room and make the air feel heavier. There are people who sit at your table, drink your coffee, listen to your stories halfway, and when they leave you more tired than you were before. For many years I thought that was normal. I thought growing old meant accepting everything with patience, swallowing certain words, opening the door to anyone who said, "I only want what's best for you." But life becomes honest when the body starts collecting the bill. One sleepless night after an argument weighs more than it used to. A cutting remark echoes for days. A demand from a child, a relative, an old friend, or a nosy neighbor can steal the peace of an entire week. And the worst part is that many people call it being too sensitive, as if an elderly person no longer has the right to protect themselves. I saw good men like Earl Patterson grow old surrounded by people who only showed up to ask for something. I saw strong women like Ruth Coleman spend decades trying to please adult children who were never satisfied. I saw friends lose money, health, and joy because they confused presence with love. And I myself took too long to understand that a person can be sitting right beside you and still be stealing your peace. That is why I need to tell you this calmly. After 60, you do not cut people off to prove your strength. You cut them off so you do not spend the last years of your life bleeding inside while pretending everything is fine. The first type of person you need to cut out after 60 is the one who only shows up when they need something. They do not ask how you slept. They do not care whether your blood pressure is stable, and they do not notice when your voice sounds tired. But when they need to borrow money, ask for a favor, get a signature, find a ride, receive advice, or have someone solve a problem for them, they remember exactly where you live. And in the beginning, you try to justify it. You tell yourself that this is just how family is, that old friends have that kind of freedom, that maybe the person is just going through a difficult season. But over time, you begin to notice a pattern. The phone never rings for a light conversation. The visit never happens just to have coffee. The message never begins with genuine longing. There is always a need hidden behind a beautiful word. I knew a man named Harold Bennett, a simple man from Kentucky, who spent years helping an adult nephew. First it was an overdue bill, then it was a car repair, then it was an emergency that always seemed to appear at the end of the month. Harold used to say, "He's my own blood." But when Harold got sick and needed someone to take him to the doctor, the young man did not answer the phone. That was the day Harold understood the painful difference between being loved and being used. After 60, helping someone is not the problem. The problem is becoming a tool in the hands of someone who only sees you when they need to tighten a screw in their own life. True love does not appear only when there is something to gain. True friendship does not turn your kindness into an obligation. And true family does not measure your worth by how much you can still give. The second type of person you need to cut out of your life after 60 is the one who turns guilt into a chain. They don't need to raise their voice. They don't need to pound the table. They don't need to clearly say they want to control your life. They simply make you feel like a bad person for having boundaries. They say things like, "After everything I've done for you, you've changed. Now that you're old, you've become selfish." Or that phrase that lands like a stone in your chest, "I thought I could count on you." And then you give in. Not because you agree, but because you're too tired to be seen as ungrateful. You open your wallet when you wanted to say no. You accept a visit when you wanted silence. You agree to a decision that wounds your peace just so you don't have to hear that you are abandoning someone. Little by little, guilt becomes an invisible leash, and the person holding that leash learns exactly which words to use to pull you back. I remember a woman named Helen Whitaker from rural Pennsylvania. She had an adult daughter who always said her mother didn't care about the family anymore whenever Helen refused to watch the grandchildren every weekend. Helen loved those children, but her body could no longer take it. Even so, she said yes, prepared food, cleaned the house, smiled with eyes hollow from exhaustion. One day, standing in the kitchen with a wet towel in her hands, she whispered, "I'm not living. I'm paying a debt that never ends." After 60, true care does not use guilt as a weapon. True love may feel sad about a boundary, but it does not try to destroy you because of it. If someone can only love you when you obey, maybe that person is not asking for affection. Maybe they are demanding control. The third type of person you need to cut out of your life after 60 is the one who does not respect your home, your time, and your silence. This person shows up without warning, walks in speaking loudly, disrupts the rhythm of your afternoon, touches things they should not touch, criticizes your routine, notices the dust on the furniture, comments on what you eat, on the medicine you take, on the time you go to sleep, and still acts as if they are keeping you company. After a certain age, home stops being just a place with walls, a door, and a roof. Home becomes the last piece of the world where your soul tries to rest. The armchair by the window, the table where you slowly drink your coffee, the quiet hallway, the old photograph on the sideboard, the clock marking the hours without hurry. All of that begins to carry a weight that rushed people do not understand. When someone invades that space without respect, they are not just entering your home, they are entering your breath. I knew an older man named Clifford Hayes from Vermont who lived alone in a simple house near a dirt road. He liked to wake up early, make eggs, listen to the radio softly, and spend a few minutes looking at the trees before the day began. But an acquaintance named Roy Mitchell would show up almost every morning, uninvited, talking about problems, politics, money, and complaints. Clifford would laugh out of politeness, serve coffee out of habit, but afterward he would feel exhausted, as if the house had been robbed from the inside. One day he finally said, "Roy, I need my mornings back." And that seemed small, but it changed everything. After 60, protecting your silence is not rudeness, it is emotional survival. Someone who truly respects you understands a closed door. Someone who does not understand it may never have truly respected your peace. The fourth type of person you need to cut out of your life after 60 is the one who laughs at your pain and diminishes your story. Maybe they do it with small jokes, sharp comments, or that little sideways smile that seems to say you are exaggerating. You share a difficult memory and they respond as if it were drama. You talk about an old loss and they change the subject. You try to explain why certain things still hurt and they treat your wound as if it were just an old person's stubbornness. That hurts in a way few people understand, because after a certain age your memories are not just stories, they are pieces of your identity. Every photograph you kept, every name you still remember, every house you lived in, every person you lost, every mistake you carry in silence, all of it forms the map of who you became. When someone mocks that, they are not just making a joke. They are saying your entire life can be treated as something unimportant. I remember a man named Walter Green from Iowa. He had worked in factories for almost 40 years, raised 3 children, buried his wife, and still tried to keep a certain tenderness in his eyes. At a family dinner, he began telling a memory about the first winter after he became a widower. Before he could finish, a younger relative laughed and said, "Here he goes with those old stories again." Walter stopped, lowered his eyes to his plate, and never finished the sentence. The room was still full of people, but in that moment he was alone. After 60, you do not need to beg people to respect your pain. Someone who truly loves you may not understand everything, but they listen with care. Someone who turns your story into a joke may no longer deserve to sit so close to your soul. The fifth type of person you need to cut from your life after 60 is the one who only feels at peace when you obey. This may be the hardest one to recognize, because it often appears using beautiful words: care, concern, protection, family, safety. But behind those words, there is a silent demand. You have to do things their way, think the way they want, accept their plan, and still be grateful for being helped. I saw this happen to a man named Samuel Turner from Ohio. After he turned 79, a nephew named Andrew began treating every decision Samuel made as if it were a sign of incapacity. He wanted to choose the bank, control the accounts, decide who could visit him, tell him what he should sell, where he should live, and even which old objects still made sense to keep. Samuel said he felt like a visitor inside his own home, walking slowly so he would not disturb the person who claimed to be there to protect him. Now, do not confuse this with real help. Real help asks, listens, respects, and accepts a no without turning you into the villain. Control disguised as love does the opposite. It calls your clarity stubbornness, your preference a whim, your boundary ingratitude, and your own will a danger. Little by little, you start asking permission to live small parts of your own routine, and by the time you realize it, you have already handed the key to your peace to someone who should never have held it. After 60, anyone who demands obedience in exchange for presence needs to lose the place of command in your life. Maybe you do not need to push that person away with anger, but you do need to take away their right to decide for you. Because love that only works when you make yourself smaller is not care, it is possession. And no one grows old in peace when they have to abandon their own dignity just to keep being accepted. Now listen carefully. Cutting someone out of your life after 60 does not mean wishing them harm. It simply means no longer allowing them to keep walking into your peace with dirty shoes. Sometimes cutting someone off is not a door slammed in anger, but a distance placed with dignity. You can still love a child, a brother, a nephew, an old friend, or a long-time neighbor, and still accept that this person can no longer occupy the center of your routine. Love should not require you to lose sleep, health, money, silence, and respect just to prove that you still care. After a certain age, life begins to become simpler and more serious at the same time. You realize you no longer have the energy for repeated arguments, invasive visits, emotional blackmail, cruel laughter, or control disguised as care. What you once tolerated out of politeness, your body now calls a burden. So do not blame yourself for choosing peace. You are not cold for needing silence. You are not selfish for protecting your home. You are not ungrateful for saying no. Perhaps the greatest proof of wisdom after 60 is finally understanding that living well in the years you have left is also your responsibility. Today, if there is someone draining your old age, think honestly. Maybe you do not need to hate, fight, or explain everything all over again. Maybe you only need to reduce their access, stop responding on impulse, close a door calmly, and remember that your peace has value too. After 60, your time should not be spent trying to convince difficult people to treat you with respect. You have lived long enough to know that not everyone who is close to you is truly on your side. Some only come around when they need something. Others use guilt, invade your home, mock your pain, or call control care. But there is still one decision no one can make for you: choosing who deserves to remain close to your soul. So answer me honestly. What type of person do you need to cut out of your life before it is too late? If this message touched you, share it with someone over 60 who needs to protect their own peace. Comment below which boundary you are ready to set, and subscribe to the channel, because maybe your new life begins the day you stop abandoning yourself.